Welcome back to Warchant.com, another version of Warchant TV for you. And we are joined by the man, Warchant's managing editor, Ira Schoffel. And Ira, we're going to talk about big picture stuff. Got to bring you on to talk about what's going on. Things are changing every day with college sports. Or there's nothing with college sports, but what could be happening with college sports always seems to be changing hourly. And we wanted to talk about some of the big picture stuff for the season coming up. We hope coming up soon. And so what we did is, and if you're not on Warchant, get on there, 30-day free trial, code is Warchant30, but did a story kind of looking at different scenarios for how the season might play out from the beginning of, it's a normal fall full slate to the whole season being potentially canceled. So how, what are some of the variations of that? How would that impact Florida State one way or the other? So, get on there and read that. And by the way, if you're enjoying Warchant's videos, a couple things, hit that little down the bottom right-hand corner, the subscribe button. There's a little square right at the bottom of the video. Click that. You'll get it. It's free. You get updated whenever we have videos like this. And then also that little like button, that little thumbs up. Man, click that thumbs up for us. That really helps a lot. So minimal effort on your guys' part does us a lot of good. So Ira, let's go through some of these things. Again, more detail in the story, but first scenario, probably looking less and less likely with yesterday's news that the Big Ten is going to a conference-only schedule. There's rumors, rumblings that the ACC might follow suit. As of the time we're taping this, we haven't heard that's happening. Not that it won't happen, but as of right now, there's been no solid information that's definitely going down. So let's talk briefly about that scenario. I want to go through some of the other ones. Not a whole lot of impact, I think, if there's a regular season going as scheduled, except for the fact, obviously, there's going to be – is there any question at this point there's going to be reduced fans in the stands if that happens?
Yeah, no, it's going to be greatly reduced. I mean, I think, about a month ago we were hoping and we were talking to some people in the business that were thinking maybe they could get half capacity. So at Doak Campbell Stadium, maybe you'd have 40,000 fans, 35,000 fans. Then I was hearing about 18 to 20,000 fans. And now it seems like it's going to be very sparsely attended, if at all. I mean, my guess is there'll be some amount, maybe up to 15,000, because you could still really socially distance at that point. But at this point, you can't roll anything out, and that would be no fans at all.
And that's either, obviously a few are better than none, because that's really the bottom line. I mean, we will talk about the TV contracts later, how that could be affected by some of the other variations on schedules. But yeah, that's a huge amount of revenue that comes into the athletic program either way. So regardless, no matter almost what happens, that's going to get cut dramatically, which is not a good situation. We're going to talk more in the coming days and weeks about finances at Florida State. I know you had the story about the athletic department making a bunch of cuts, and you can read that on warchant.com. And unfortunately, these kind of things continue. We're going to see more of that, more cost cutting, more salaries, and more furloughs. Sports potentially being cut. It's a reality of what's happening in college athletics right now. So I guess really the next, and I put two different ones, kind of separate them out, but a conference only schedule, which it seems like it's trending that way. There's a lot of different ways you can skin the cat here, Ira. You could try to start it in September, kind of where the schedule is, and then maybe spread them out. What's interesting, when I looked at the schedules, Florida State, Miami, and I believe Virginia Tech are the only three schools in the ACC that don't have a conference game scheduled in September. So I don't know how they would, do you move some games around, or what do you do with that whole – I don't think they would just have FSU sit around until October. But is this right now kind of looking – I know the whole COVID thing, everything changes constantly. Is it kind of looking now maybe the most likely scenario between a full slate in the fall to a limited conference-only slate in the fall to the spring to no season? I mean, if you had to guess, is this kind of the most likely scenario?
Yeah, I think, to me, I still think they're going to try to make it work where you have the conference schedule and one additional game. For example, in the ACC and the SEC, it would work out well. We all know, obviously, Florida State and Florida play every year, but, Georgia Tech and Georgia play, South Carolina and Clemson play. I think there's 4 or 5 different –
Kentucky, Louisville.
And Louisville. So that, you have those natural ones. And then, you have, they could easily pick up the other, schools could easily pick up one opponent maybe to make that possible. So that's kind of where I think they'll end up doing, trying to make it 9 games. But the bare minimum, I think it would be those 8 conference games. And then, I think the spring idea is probably as you've been saying all along, that's the last resort. But even if they do, this modified approach, there's still questions, as you said, whether you wait till kind of when those games are normally scheduled a little bit later, or do you start right away and try to build in some open time during the season in case you have situations where a bunch of kids test positive and you want to take some time off. So, that's still up in the air. I don't think they have any firm grasp on how that would work out yet.
Really, the other variation on that, which I mentioned, was maybe starting the season in October. And I think with the advantage of, I think that would do, now you have to reschedule everything. Now that would be a mess trying to get all that figured out. But the advantage of that is, look, I think we know when students are going to show up on campus, and whatever that is, late August, when they show up, there's going to be spikes. I mean, it's without a doubt. I'm not making any political commentary on this. You know what's going to happen. They're younger people. They're going to congregate. They're going to go to parties. They're going to hang out. So there's going to be spikes in late August, early September.
And the students are all coming from different parts of the country and world. So for sure, yeah.
So when you're trying to start a season, what's Florida State? September 5th is the first game, and most of them that first weekend. That's right when these spikes are going to be happening, in theory, based on that. So if you give yourself a month of a buffer to kind of maybe those spikes settle down a little bit, you get a better grasp on your situation. You might be a little bit better off, because trying to cancel those things at the last minute of suddenly, 20 players test positive 2 days before the game. I mean, it's just going to be a nightmare trying to, especially when teams are traveling, everything else. So that may be a viable alternative. The other thing I want to ask you about, Ira, was the idea of regionalizing this. One of the things they want to do is limit travel. And that would be another way if you shake up a conference-only schedule. It does, for instance, Florida State. Does Syracuse come off the schedule? And I think Boston College is supposed to visit Florida State. Did they take off those two games and maybe add a Georgia Tech or someone else a little bit more local? How viable do you think that option is?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And it was something that we talked about, I don't know, it was 2 or 3 months ago, when we were trying to look at different scenarios that might make the most sense. And that's one that bubbled up. And I really think it makes very good sense. I don't know if they'll do it because of logistics. They still have to work everything out. But maybe, if you look at the ACC, for example, you can kind of cut the conference geographically somewhere around Virginia and, maybe keep the northern schools in the north and keep the southern schools in the south, have Florida State playing the Georgia Techs and Miamis, and not worry so much about the Atlantic or the coastal for this particular year, and just play the teams that make the most geographic sense. And then again, that also would work that's also why those ACC, SEC games kind of work, is because, you're talking about in-state rivalries. You're just going 2 hours away, maybe an hour away to play that game. It's not like you're trying to play a team on the other side of the country.
And a lot of times maybe not even staying in a hotel, depending on how they schedule. Maybe you can get in and out and eliminate. That's another risk factor right there. And it was interesting. I peeked ahead a little bit. And I think Georgia Tech schedule played Notre Dame the same weekend as Florida State, Boston College. Now, I don't know how the whole Notre Dame thing's going to work, and but I mean, if they, because of travel, because they don't consider them a football member, and they bounce them out of this whole scenario, then hey, Georgia Tech on an open weekend to come down to Tallahassee, or Florida State go up to Atlanta that weekend, that might work out. All right, let's talk about the option. I've been discussing this with people on the message boards. It seems like for months now, the whole spring. There's a lot of people say just cancel the fall. Let's move everything to the spring, and then everything will be fine then. Look, I get it. You're hoping things with the pandemic will settle down. I understand the motivation to do that. Let's just wash our hands of the fall and just move ahead. I don't know the reasoning to make that decision in early mid-July. It doesn't make any sense to me, but I mean, if you did it, and you and I think are in agreement on this, the logistical nightmare of trying to do everything in the spring, I don't think people can really envision how difficult it is. I mean, you've got TV contracts that are already going to be with all these winter sports, basketball, baseball, that's going on already. Those are scheduled. Those things are already set up. So you're going to have to redo TV, and you're going to have to shuffle all these schedules so they don't conflict with each other and all the travel problems. But bigger than that, in my opinion, is, I mean, you got football, you got pro football. They have their combine in early February. Do you really see, Ira, if a Marvin Wilson, a Tamarian Terry, DJ Matthews, who's there, Corey Durden, I mean, any of these elite players that are going to be potentially taking the draft, playing a spring season, and then bypassing the combine and the workouts?
Yeah, and you're across all of college football, you got to multiply that by, guys like Trevor Lawrence obviously are not going to be playing. I mean, the best players that are draft eligible across the country wouldn't be playing. As you said, also the idea, and from what we've heard, the NFL, I think there was actually a report recently where the NFL was like, yeah, we're not
Yeah.
changing our schedule to help you guys out. There's so many other issues though. And it's funny, as you said, it's like it's been watching you kind of like play whack-a-mole on the message boards for the last few months, going to different threads saying, no, they're not going to do the spring. I mean, unless it's a last resort, but
Yeah.
one of the, there's so many things. The idea of having college football players play 2 football seasons, even if they're condensed, playing 20 games or 18 games in one calendar year, that's a lot that's a lot of wear and tear on a body. Then you look at the TV contracts, as you mentioned, the inventory in the fall. Every TV network wants to be showing college football on Saturdays in the fall, or Thursdays and Fridays, sometimes Mondays and Tuesdays. But you don't have that in the spring. The spring already has a lot of other sports going on. Then you have staffing issues at these universities. A lot of the athletic training staff, when football season is in play, you're talking about 100 athletes. The athletic training staff is consumed with that. You've got the academic staff and everybody. There's so much focus on that one sport. If you start playing those when the other sports are going on as well, I mean, how are you going to staff all of these different areas with all of these sports going on at the same time? So it's a complete nightmare. Now, if they cannot play in the fall, if they don't feel like there's any way they can do it safely in the fall, then yeah, I think they'll say, all right, well, we're going to try in the spring to see what we can do. But I mean, the TV revenue would be much reduced in the spring. I just think there's a lot of reasons. And then you may not be able to play then either. So I think they're going to do everything they can to be able to play in the fall.
You could be in the same situation, right? I mean, who knows? We don't know. What we know about this pandemic is we don't know. I mean, it could be the same thing in the spring as it in the fall. Then what'd you do? You just pushing the can down the road to the same thing. But let's be a little bit more introspective with Florida State. I think this would be even more devastating. And we've talked about all the logistical nightmares for administrators, TVs, athletes, staffing, as you said, Ira. But I mean, selfishly for Florida State, I mean, can you imagine what this would do for recruiting? If you got rid of a fall season, I mean, poor Mike Norvell and the staff, they get here, they had a handful of weeks to start recruiting. I mean, for this class, and then boom, the pandemic kids can't visit. They can't visit. Everything's been in a dead period. And then you extend that to the fall, and then signing days in December. So you would have it in almost an entire year where they're brand new. They can't recruit any of these kids, at least person to person, Zoom calls. Yeah. Good luck recruiting guys in Zoom calls, especially after this team has stunk up the place for 3 straight years. They need to go out and prove themselves. They need to prove, hey, we're viable. Even if the record isn't great, even if they get, let's say, 7-8 wins, but the product is looking better on the field, they can really sell the product, get kids on campus, see how they operate, get in the locker room. It would do wonders for the staff to recruiting. If you take all that away, man, I think it's going to really hurt recruiting for the 2021 class.
The way this year has gone for Mike Norvell in recruiting, I mean, it almost feels like that would be a fitting conclusion because it's just been one thing after another. I mean, they got hired in December. They tried to put together what they could for that class. They went on the road in January, and they really focused on 2020 kids, signing those kids for that class, but then also trying to work ahead for 2021. Then in February was a complete dead period, which it usually isn't, but the NCAA changed that this year. So they couldn't go on the road in February. Kids couldn't come on visits in February. March, it opens up. They're getting all these kids on campus. Kids are planning to cover the spring game. Everything's going great, and then everything gets shut down by the virus. And then in May, when you'd like to be able to go out and recruit and make these contacts and connections, that's shut down as well. Now, a lot of that's in place for everybody, but for a first-year staff, it's just brutal. And then, as you said, it's their first year at a Power 5 school for Mike Norvell and this particular staff at Florida State. And the one thing they really need to do to win over some of these recruits is show some improvement on the field. If they don't get a chance to do that, man, I mean, they've done a decent job. I think the class right now is number 28 in the country. It's in the top 30, top 25, top 30. And I think they'll do it as good a job as they can. But if they don't get to play this fall, I mean, it's just a backbreaker, I think, for that first recruiting class.
Yeah, it would be. It'd be awful. All right, before we get to the last, I want to remind people again, please click that thumbs up down there if you see that. It helps us out. And then the subscribe button on the bottom right. It's free for you. Get alerted on videos like this. Hopefully more uplifting ones like Michael's recruiting chats and stuff like that. Maybe this one we're depressing you a little bit. Sorry about that. But
and maybe the happy hour later today.
Yes, that's right. We're going to have the happy hour. So that'll be hopefully a little bit more upbeat when we talk about that. All right, doomsday scenario. Let's do it. I mean, we've gone through all the scenarios, and people don't want to talk about it. But I mean, as we said, what we know is we don't know how this is going to play out. What if there's no football at all in fall or the spring, and the whole thing is pushed back to the fall of 2021? So a year from now, we're finally going to kick off this season. I think just in the college, to me, this is more of a grander thing, what it would do to college athletics across the board, because not only Florida State, every school is ultra dependent on the revenue that flows from television. It's not like ESPN's going to say, oh, we feel bad for you guys, Big Ten. We usually give you $50 million a year. Nope, you're getting zilch. You ain't getting anything for football anymore. Same thing with the ACC and all the other conferences, and plus throw in the ticket sales that support not only football but all the other sports. I think you would see massive slashing of Olympic sports across the board, and I think it would dramatically affect some football programs too. I mean, I don't know, some major Power 5 programs might not be able to sustain at the level they had in the past if you miss an entire year of revenue coming in from football. So I don't know what that would do shakeup-wise. I mean, there's been talk about maybe it's so shaken up, maybe it would somehow the Power 5 conferences get together and create maybe three or four super conferences. Yeah. Something would have to give, don't you think, on a macro scale if an entire season was missed?
Well, I mean, even if they just play these conference-only schedules, it's going to really do damage to those group of 5 schools, because those schools a lot of times make their budget by playing Power 5 schools for the guarantee. You know, if you're a school in some of those conferences, you might make $1.5 million, $2 million from playing a guarantee game. That's a huge part of your budget that's been taken away. So no matter what happens, and then the reduced ticket sales and everything else, this is going to be a disastrous situation for all these athletic departments, because like you said, they've all been kind of living, hand to mouth, the way people do when they don't have a savings, or they don't, they can't store away any money. They're just trying to get by. That's how these athletic departments, because they've been, no matter how much money came in, they were spending it before they actually got it. And so, it would be a disaster for everybody. If the doomsday scenario happened, I mean, the entire face of college athletics would change. We've already seen some schools cutting sports. They're cutting sports. Some of the schools, Nebraska's cut budgets. Florida State, as we said, had layoffs this week. Other schools have started cutting. Stanford cut 11 sports this week. Those cuts are, from what I understand, based on the best case scenario. And so if you get the worst case scenario, I mean, you're going to see carnage like you've never seen before in terms of sports just evaporating, because there's no way to reduce expenses and stay up and keep those sports in place. Like once if you have a sport, say track, you have so many scholarships you're going to devote to track. You can't just cut. There's nothing really to cut other than to just stop the program, because those scholarships have to be paid. Coaches, it's not like you've got exorbitant salaries and coaches contracts in some of those sports. It's mostly the scholarship money, travel, housing, things like that. So I mean, you're going to see major sports cut off. And then, as you alluded to, I really do think there'll be just a seismic shift. And we wrote about this recently, that there could be a seismic shift in terms of what the Power 5 looks like. And maybe you go away from the ACC, SEC, Big Ten, Big 12, and Pac-12 and go to some sort of conglomerate or consolidated conferences, because they're all going to need each other to get by. I mean, the SEC and the Big Ten have so much more money than everybody else, but even they can't just withstand something like this. So I think they're all going to have to pull together. Even Notre Dame, who never wants to play in everybody else's sandbox, I think they're going to have to do the same.
So maybe Notre Dame finally gets in the ACC. Maybe something good comes from this. Who knows?
It could
in the long run. And that's the thing too. Even if some of the medium things say we happen, it's really I'm going to write about this later about how it's really going to continue to separate the haves and the have-nots. Schools like Alabama, LSU, some of these, maybe they can withstand a little bit this, but you got these,
Michigan, like you said, maybe
Michigan, some of the huge schools that have a huge alumni base and endowed scholarships and everything else, they can maybe weather the storm a little bit better. There's a lot of the have-nots, the other 90% of college football, that simply cannot take it. Their football programs are going to take a hit. So the scenario we've seen in college football, where it's just getting wide, that there's less and less parity, I think it's going to become even more so. The last thing I want to mention, this doomsday scenario, Ira, which is just really makes things even worse for this, is how do you handle the scholarships? Because I can't imagine if you're not playing, if you're, let's say Terry wants to come back one more year, just throwing that out there. But of course they're going to say, sure, no one's going to lose their eligibility. Obvious conclusion is, look, you didn't play. We're going to push over your eligibility one more year. Well, that's great, except for the fact you have another 25 kids coming in a recruiting class. So, a handful, sure, some, maybe 10 leave for the NFL, but suddenly you're at 100 scholarships. So the NCAA's got to go, okay, we're going to bump up the scholarship limits, let's say to 100. Well, that causes problems. First of all, you got to fund. That's a lot of money, 15 more scholarships. And it's not going to go away the next year. What do you do? Then you start kicking kids out the following year. And then there's Title IX implications. You can't just add 15 full scholarships and not do something equivalent for the women's sports. So then that's another expense. So, I mean, again, we just get to this at all costs. This doomsday scenario has to be avoided.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess if you think about it, some of the other fall sports, you got soccer and volleyball and I guess cross country. So maybe some of those players, get the extra years as well. But yeah, to your point, this past spring they presented the opportunity. The NCAA said, okay, those spring athletes, if they want to come back for another year of eligibility, they can, but you got to pay for them, as you said. So in Florida State's case, I can't remember the number of actual players that decided to come back. I think it's in the 20s, but the cost is $500,000 just to bring that number of athletes back. And some of those are partial scholarships. You start talking about in the football where they're all full scholarships or volleyball, it's a bigger ticket. So yeah, I mean, again, I guess not playing in the spring is better than not playing at all this year. But even playing in the spring would be difficult, but at least that would be better than not playing at all.
Right. Because
then you get into that situation where, you just have everything's haywire if they don't play this whole year.
Yeah. All right. Sorry to bring everybody down, but like Ira said, we'll have happy hour coming up 5:00 today. That should be, we'll try to uplift your spirits a little bit, have a few libations. We'll help things out a little bit, and got some other interesting You got any other content coming up? Position previews, anything like that? Ira?
I was going to say, if we've driven you to drink, come hang out with us at the happy hour and call in with some questions. But yeah, no, we've got some more stuff. We actually, ironically, we've got another opponent preview coming up. Corey did a preview on Boise State for a game that may not actually happen.
Better get that preview up quick
before that game gets canceled. And and we're rolling out position previews. We just, if people haven't seen it, we just ran 2 pieces on reshaping the roster, broke down the offensive and defensive rosters, who left, who came back this season, which players are entering the program, transfers, a lot of transfers. So it's kind of a digestible position by position breakdown of which players are gone, which players came back, and which players have entered the program. And if you look at it, I mean, I think on paper, Florida State should be a much improved football team this year.
Yeah,
assuming the season happens.
Yeah, I went through your defense thing, and I started going through that defensive backfield. Holy moly, is this team loaded? I knew the secondary was going to had a lot of great players on it, but man, they could field 2 pretty good Division I secondaries the way that thing looks right now. So yeah, really good read from I appreciate that. I think someone even suggested maybe doing one on special teams. So I think that'd be good. Can't forget about kickers. Everybody loves the kickers.
Exactly.
All right. Well, thank you for tuning into Warchant TV. We'll have a lot more content for you, so stay tuned. Ira, keep up the great work, buddy.
Thanks, man. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, folks.